Alright guys, welcome back to another one. In today's video, I want to talk about some PlayStation news, some pretty big stuff, as over the past week or so, we've had some pretty substantial information drops. There's 5 things we absolutely should go over in today's video, so let's dive in. The first and probably biggest thing here is the Kadokawa acquisition. These guys are the parent company of FromSoftware, and just over a week ago, it was rumored that Sony were apparently looking at possibly acquiring specifically FromSoftware from them, to of course snatch up ownership over FromSoft's IPs. Sony already have a 14% stake in FromSoftware, but complete ownership over the company itself would automatically mean all IPs related to FromSoft would be under the wing of PlayStation. And over the past decade, FromSoft have been making an incredible name for themselves, especially with the recent 2022 Elden Ring. Obviously, FromSoft and Sony are no strangers to one another, with working on Bloodborne with Sony's Japan studio team, along with Demon's Souls that was exclusively released on PlayStation 3, and the recent Demon's Souls remake, developed by Bluepoint Games. Now, this acquisition rumor was followed up by Kadokawa Corporation themselves, confirming that they had in fact received a letter of intent to acquire the company's shares. As of right now, no decision has been made, but when something is finalized, will be let known. Bloomberg followed up with a really interesting article mentioning that Sony and Kadokawa have been in talks with a potential buyout for many years. This isn't actually something that's new, though this would be the first time that something has publicly been announced. So this would certainly tell us that the seriousness behind this deal is very real. Here's the catch though, it has been mentioned by Kadokawa that rather than Sony just simply picking up FromSoftware, a buyout deal will only go through if Sony agrees to buy out the entire parent company, including all of its IPs, subsidiaries, and other assets. For most of us, we know Kadokawa as the parent company of FromSoftware, but they are a lot larger than just FromSoft. These guys have been in the publication game for an incredibly long time, known for a ton of different anime studios and anime IPs. They even own Spike Chunsoft, who are known nowadays for Danganronpa, along with even video game publishing, which is another great asset to Sony. Acquire Studio, who got their name from developing the PlayStation 1 Tenchu games. Nowadays, they're mainly known for contracted development, with recently working on the Mario and Luigi Brothership title. These guys could prove beneficial to Sony with helping out on first-party development, as well as Gotcha Games, known for RPG Maker. The bulk of Kadokawa, however, is not so much video games, whereas it's more so anime. We do know that Sony, however, do want to get a little bit more serious when it comes to visual media, whether it do be the anime sector or films and TV. They've certainly made this obvious over the past few years, with more interest directed in these avenues, especially towards anime with the buyout of Crunchyroll and Funimation. So acquiring Kadokawa would give them an entire anime library, as well as the rights to all owned IPs from that, and there's a lot. This also means that Sony would be able to further expand upon some of the popular IPs that Kadokawa has, going in the direction of making either a film or video game adaptation. It's been reported that the buyout tag for Kadokawa comes in at about 4.1 billion. Certainly not as big as Microsoft's purchase of Activision Blizzard, but just a little bit more expensive than Sony's purchase of Bungie in 2022 that came in at 3.6 billion. Now, if we're looking at it, one of the main reasons why Sony decided to purchase Bungie wasn't necessarily for the Destiny IP that Bungie are known for nowadays. It's more so the expertise in the area of multi-platform game development and live service titles. Their expertise in live service has likely been utilized across PlayStation as a whole and not just solely focused towards the development of Bungie. But we're still yet to see the fruits of this acquisition ripen. It's not as if Bungie have given too much back to PlayStation as of right now, and obviously with the price tag of 3.6 billion, it's going to take quite some time to see that money returned. However, the acquisition of Kadokawa coming in at 4.1 billion, especially with FromSoftware, knowing that they make incredible video games that sell, I don't have a single doubt in my mind that that would be more beneficial to Sony as a company than the acquisition of Bungie. Now, there's a lot of talk about this, obviously, because this is a pretty big deal to have the catalog of FromSoftware there owned by Sony means they can pretty much do what they want with it, though I would say this would be a likely and similar setup to that of the agreement that Bungie have with Sony, and that's that they remain independent. They still decide exactly what they want to work on, how they want to work on it, and that Destiny must remain multi-platform. Both developers and publishers are realizing too that multi-platform is absolutely the way to go, and because of FromSoftware's large history on multi-platform, especially as of recently, and the insane sales figure that Elden Ring managed to hit with being a multi-platform title, you'd think that Sony would want to keep FromSoftware as a multi-platform developer. But then I'm sure some people at Sony are probably looking through the lens of, what if we were to make FromSoftware games exclusive to PlayStation? That would definitely be another major reason to purchase a PlayStation system. Otherwise, if this does actually happen, this will without a doubt be the single most beneficial acquisition that Sony have probably ever picked up. The other really big plus here is Bloodborne, just more happening with this IP, with actually having FromSoftware attached to it. I don't think anyone would be interested in seeing a Bloodborne sequel, but developed by someone that's not FromSoftware. However, if Sony actually do own FromSoft as a company, and FromSoft are down to do something more with Bloodborne, then we could totally see more happening with this IP. Moving over to the next slice of chicken, a brand new PlayStation Handheld is actually in development. That's right, a PSP 3, if you want to call it that, or at least some type of handheld is in the works at PlayStation in order to rival Nintendo's hold over the handheld market and to also compete with Xbox's upcoming handheld as well. Now, I find it funny that this information was confirmed through Bloomberg only a matter of days after the same had been done from Phil Spencer in regards to an Xbox handheld that is currently in a prototype stage, which is likely a move from PlayStation following up to try keep eyes on them in regards to the handheld space. Xbox's focus over the past few years has been the accessibility of games and being able to play them on a multitude of devices and not just an Xbox system. However, this is mainly surrounding cloud gaming, and cloud gaming is still yet to actually hit into the mainstream, especially with cloud servers not being located absolutely everywhere. It means that latency and input delay issues are still a thing. Another logical step for Microsoft to make here, though, would be to create a handheld system that can natively play their catalog of games, especially with something like Game Pass attached to it. That's a pretty attractive offer. Portable AAA gaming has become a huge thing since 2017, and Nintendo stepping forward to announce the Nintendo Switch. Since then, we've seen quite a few different competitors step into the market to create a similar device, and ones that are also more powerful, for the like of Asus or of course Steam with the Steam Deck. And these devices have seen some pretty big success. So it's not surprising that both Xbox and PlayStation want a bit of a taste of this market. The idea from PlayStation here is to be able to play PlayStation 5 games, as it's mentioned via Bloomberg, natively on a handheld system. Apparently it's still quite some time away, but with the mention of being able to play PlayStation 5 games, this at least lets us know that this is something that Sony are planning on releasing before the next generation Switch. Of course, this is all tentative, and in the prototype early stages, things are subject to change here. This might be a thing that could release simultaneously with PlayStation 6. I'd also say that another reason as to why Sony are probably looking at doing this is due to the success of the PlayStation Portal. This has far exceeded the expectations of Sony. It's a remote player for PlayStation 5. And while personally I'm not really into this kind of thing, apparently a lot of people are. And also with the recent update that was applied to the Portal, it now allows you to stream any of the games a part of the PlayStation Plus catalog. So similar to Xbox's idea of being able to access some of those Game Pass games and stream them via the cloud on your mobile phone, it's a similar setup here now with PlayStation Portal. And no doubt Sony's new actual proper handheld will be able to not only natively play games, but also stream them. You guys know me, I hate the whole game streaming thing, but the option will likely be there for those that are interested in it. Another interesting comment that was made by Phil Spencer in the Bloomberg article talking about the Xbox handheld was that there are no red lines when it comes to their portfolio of games going multi-platform. So a big thing that happened throughout this year was starting to see some of those first-party Xbox titles go to other systems like the PlayStation. And for many months, there's been rumors that games like Halo or Gears of of War or the Forza series will also make the jump to something like PlayStation. Phil Spencer is basically saying nothing is off the table at this point and that anything is viable. There is no decision made as of right now whether or not the next version of Halo will come to other systems outside of PC and Xbox. Within the leak suggesting that Halo is switching its engine from the in-house Slipspace engine to Unreal Engine 5, mentioning that they are currently remaking Halo Combat Evolved on UE5. It was also mentioned within that link prior to the official announcement of the engine switch only last month that this remade version of Halo Combat Evolved on UE5 will also be releasing on PlayStation. Considering that most of the information in that leak came out to be true, it's very possible that this remake could actually land on PS5. Now, a little while back, I reported that in October, when Dino Crisis and Resident Evil Director's Cut had released a part of the Classics catalog, unfortunately, they weren't able to be purchased individually, and the only way to access them was via PlayStation Plus. You had to have a subscription. There have been a couple of other cases of games doing this within the Classics catalog, and this seems to be a Capcom thing, mysteriously. However, because of this paywall, and especially attached to Dino Crisis, considering it has a very large cult following, a lot of people were not happy about this, and seemingly Sony caught on to it. Because as of last week, both Dino Crisis and Resident Evil Director's Cut can now be purchased individually. We did it. As consumers, if there is something that is just blatantly wrong and that is anti-consumer, step up. Talk about it. Let them know you're pissed off. Let them know you're annoyed. Let them know this ain't right. So through all of the complaining, we did it. We won. These games no longer require you to have a PlayStation Plus subscription, and the most expensive one at that. And hopefully Sony learned from this. I don't want to see any more classics being added that requires you to have this subscription. That is madness. Let us just purchase the game we want to have access to. And last up for today, it has been officially reported that the PlayStation 2 has hit another big milestone, its last official one to be sure, and that is the 160 million units mark. So a few people are a little bit up in arms about this, mainly because PlayStation stopped counting units back in 2012, and production of the PlayStation 2 console ceased in 2013. The last official figure that we had from Sony was back in 2011, coming in at 150 million. So people are a little bit confused how the PlayStation 2 has just suddenly shot up to 160 million. Keeping in mind though that the system was still selling after 2011, obviously, up until 2013, when production of the system closed, so it's not totally out of the realm of possibility that in the 2-year time frame that an additional 10 million units were sold. I've seen a lot of people speculating that Sony are basically pulling this number out of their ass, as it was recently confirmed by Nintendo that the Nintendo Switch has sold 146 million. As a way to sort of round up and bump the number up a bit, Sony in response have pushed the PS2, the best-selling system of all time, up to 160. It's hard to get the concrete facts. I mean, there is this image of a PlayStation 2 Slim that's supposedly meant to be the final PS2 ever produced, with an engraving of the exact amount of units on it. The thing is though, and I think Sony know this themselves, the Nintendo Switch is absolutely going to overtake 160 mil. The Switch isn't even a decade old at this point, and as we saw with the PlayStation 2, it continued to sell units a decade after its release. The same will happen with Switch, and no doubt for some time yet, even once the Switch successor is out, Nintendo will continue to sell Switch consoles. So guys, that's some pretty big stuff happening with PlayStation at the moment. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the Kadokawa acquisition. We might end up hearing something in the coming months, as well as a new PlayStation Portable on the horizon. Leave your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Be sure to like this video. It helps me out a ton. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. A big thank you to my wonderful patrons. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. I hope you're all having a fantastic day, and we'll talk real soon.